My name is Judy and I'm the City Stitcher, and welcome to my FlossTube channel. Today is Sunday, October the 11th, and this is Canadian Thanksgiving weekend, so happy Thanksgiving from a Canadian. So if you're Canadian, hopefully you're finding a way to celebrate Thanksgiving this year. If you're not Canadian, happy Thanksgiving anyway. I hope you're having a great weekend. If this is your first time stopping by the channel, thank you for stopping by and spending some time with me, and hopefully you'll find this video interesting. If you do, please like and subscribe. If you are a returning viewer, thank you for coming back, and as I say every week, you know exactly what you're in for. You've been here before, you know what's going to happen. The topic for this week is let's talk about counting over 2. So I got a question on a video from a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about Stitcher's Math from Scott, who is struggling when he's trying to count, when stitching over 2, trying to count over to the next spot for his stitching. So we are going to talk about that at the end. We're going to follow my typical format. We're going to talk about my stitching. We're going to talk about some free patterns. We're going to talk about a little bit of haul. And then we're going to talk about the topic. So you can have the opportunity to scroll, fast forward to whatever you want to see, or stop watching when you go, I'm good. So that's what we're going to do. So let's just get on with the show, as they say. So what did I work on this week on my stitching? Well, you know exactly what I worked on. Let's all say it together. Marbeck? Marbeck Nativity? Yeah, the infamous Marbeck. Bottom panel. Working on my stuff. Whew, it's been a week. It's been a week, let me tell ya. This is what I'm working on. Let me show you where I got to. And then I will tell you my sad story and my tale of woe. So here's where I'm at. I'm sure you will all be thrilled and moved to know that the hay is done. The hay that I was going to do is done. I have to tell you, it took me more than one try, which was really unfortunate. So I did a bunch of the hay around the manger and really was unbelievably unhappy and ended up having to rip it out. There you go. So there's the hay. So again, I'm not finishing up the hay on this side because some of it overlaps with where Mary's sleeve is, and because I don't have the sleeve stitched, I can't finish that. So there's more hay in my future. Don't worry about that. Don't forget, there's also another big sheep down here. So there's more hay there. But as I came along, of course, so there's hay in the manger. There's a little bit of hay over here. There's hay over here. There's hay over here. There's hay here and hay here. There's a lot of hay, and it's finicky, really finicky. So am I completely done with this manger scene? No, I am not. I am missing the lips on the baby. Wait for it, want to know why? Because it asks for a DMC color that is not in the chart. It's not listed on the chart until you read the back stitching instructions. And I don't have it in my stash. Isn't that great? So my family is having their very, very small Thanksgiving dinner today, which is Sunday. Families in Canada, sometimes they do it on Sunday, sometimes they do it on Monday. You know, it's Thanksgiving weekend. At some point you'll have Thanksgiving dinner. So it's a very small gathering, only 4 of us. I'm planning on going over to my mother's and looking at her stash and going, so do you have the DMC color I'm missing? For the glorious, wait for it, 2 stitches. 2 back stitches. It's really awesome. Anyway, so I finished my hay, which was painful and annoying. I have now finished all of this shadowing all along the bottom here. There's more shadowing that needs to go around this shepherd, but I'm planning on tackling that when I do the steps. So came over here, backstitched the sheep, finished the wise man's head. Technically there is one stitch missing up here. I'm deciding whether, so it calls for 1 stitch of Krynic. I'm trying to decide if I want to do it in the Krynic or if I want to go get a Delica bead to put in there. I don't know, thinking about it. In the meantime, so I'm almost actually done back stitching in the headdress, which is why I started on this dark red color, is so that I could do the back stitching. So tonight I'm absolutely planning on finishing the back stitching there. Three long lines of, you know, counting. I have to admit I did one of them and I miscounted. So it's really interesting that my topic for this week is counting over 2, because apparently this week I couldn't do it myself. So wait for my wise tips. Anyway, never mind that. So I did a bunch, had to unstitch it, and unstitching, so it was the back stitching yet to be done is done in Krynic, which you know is my favorite, and unstitching the Krynic is really unpleasant. So we're going to talk about how important it is to count, and gain. Anyway, whatever. But I got it out. 3 lines left to go. And I've clearly started on the wise men. Now, this is because you know, when I'm in the middle of having a problem and you're just like, I'm about ready to throw this thing across the room and never stitch on it again, which is not the goal. I need to get this accomplished. The answer is to stop doing the thing that's driving you nuts and do something that's easier. So plain stitching, that was just like, okay, it's the thing that gives me hope. Now, the other challenging thing about this is, don't forget, I'm supposed to have this whole center panel done by the end of October, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm really worried about it. I'm really, really, really worried about it. I have 4 days, so including today, so tonight's stitching, I have 4 days before we hit the middle of the month, and really, by the middle of the month, I feel like this wise man needs to be done. There's a lot of wise men to go. Don't get me wrong, I'm feeling good that his head is done and I'm almost done back stitching him. There is no back stitching in the red portion of his robe, so that's nice. It's just stitching. There's a lot of it anyway. But here's the part that makes me not happy and not feel good about this. The entire border of his robe, because it's always nice when you ignore parts of the pattern until you get there. So this entire border around his robe is entirely done with Krynic. All of it. Don't get me wrong, in my head I knew that some of it was probably going to be Krynic. I don't think I really got to the point where I went, all of it. That entire border is entirely done in Krynic. So I think I've just decided this is called the Marbeck Krynic Nativity. That's just what it is. Anyway, getting a little worried. So yes, I have to get all of this guy done in the next 4 days. And you don't even, so on here you don't get to see all of him, which is why I'm holding this part up, because there's more of them. There's a lot of them. And a lot of Krynic border. That's going to be a sad day when that happens. Anyway, check back next week and see how I get done. Right? So the plan is he needs to be done by the 15th. Then I'm going to do the steps in the gold box, which are across the center and on either side of these guys. And then all I'd have left to do is the sheep down here with hay. And then I could scroll back up. And don't forget, I have an entire angel. I have an entire angel, and she's not petite. I don't know how I'm gonna do on my goal. I'm trying to comfort myself that, because again, that was going to give me November to do this, and theoretically the camel is smaller, and then I would be on track to anyway. Worried, really worried. So there we go. That's where we're at. The sheep at least looks like a sheep. I was looking back at last week's video and went, you know, it's really hard to tell where the sheep is and where the wise men's head covering is. And, you know, it's with back stitching, you can now tell that. So that's where I am. So fair warning, the chances of me stitching on any other piece for the rest of this month right now, I don't think so. I think it's going to be all Marbeck. As you know, all Marbeck all the time. Marbeck, the pattern of 2020 for me. Anyway, I'm only saying that because there's a lady I work with, and it's a great line. I really enjoy it. Lysol, the scent of 2020. She's kind of commented that, like, from now till the day she's dead, she's pretty sure that anytime she smells the scent of Lysol, she's gonna think of 2020. Anyway, so that's my stitching. Congratulations, that's it. One chart, that's all I stitched on, monogamous stitching, and didn't really get to the goal that I wanted. I am feeling behind. I'm starting to get worried. Anyway, so that's my stitching. I'm going to do a quick little reminder. Don't forget, October the 12th, which is tomorrow, is Caroline Off the Grid. She's doing her Blooming Bouquets sale. So here are the 4 Jeanette Douglas blooming bouquets that are available right now. You know, my whole thing was that there was a possibility that I was going to join in the sale and work on my joyful, but I have not accomplished my goals, and so I'm being punished, and I'm not allowed to start blooming bouquets. I have to, I don't know, work on Marbeck. Marbeck till it's done. Because once it's done, we're never going to say the words Marbeck ever again in my lifetime. Well, we probably are, but anyway. La, 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 la. All right. Let's talk about the featured free chart for the week. It's really the free pattern provider, not necessarily the chart of the week, because I have a couple here. And so I was watching, and again, you know I'm terrible at this, so I was watching somebody on FlossTube, and they were talking about Aurifil floss. So full disclosure here, I've never seen it, I've never used it, I don't know anybody personally who's ever used it and has commented on it, so I have no idea if it's any good or not. I don't own any. At this point, I don't have any plans to get any, because, you know, anyway, I have Marbeck to do, and it doesn't need Aurifil. Anyway, never mind that. But somebody was showing a pattern, and they commented that the chart that they were working on was a free pattern from the Aurifil site. And you know my ears always perk up when somebody says free chart. And so here are a few of the free charts from the Aurifil site itself. There are more charts there than what I'm going to show you. In fact, they have 25 charts, so you can do really small Christmas ornaments for 25 days. I think from a number last year, maybe the year before, they were running, like, you know, 25 days of Christmas somewhere along the line. And so they have these 25 ornaments. So I haven't printed out any of those. So there's 25 Christmas ornaments. There's other charts. So I have printed out 3 to show you. So this is Little Quaker ABC by Susan Ake. I'm hoping it's pronounced Ake. It's spelled like Ake, but maybe she pronounces it differently. So of course this gives you the Aurifil colors down here. So I didn't look to see if there is an Aurifil to DMC or Aurifil to anchor conversion. And quite frankly, with a pattern like this, do you need to have a conversion? No. This is a perfect opportunity for you to choose colors that you have in your stash that you want to use up. Denise, thank you for your lovely comments on last week's video. Thank you. You know, here's another one where you could use variegateds, or you could use solids, or you can make this whatever you want. So that's the Little Quaker ABC. So this is the one that someone was actually working on, which is when I, again, as my ears perked up, it went, sorry, free chart. I'll take a free chart. But they have other ones. These are all very, so they're all by the same designer, so they're all fairly similar. So this is Little Quaker Halloween. 'Tis the season. And here is Little Quaker Christmas. So on these charts, they don't actually even give you the stitch count. I'm calling it 100 by 100 across by 80 down-ish. So not gigantic. Technically totally doable by Christmas time by anybody who is not me. Because I'm stitching on Marbeck. Oh my goodness, isn't 2021 going to be glorious when I get to work on something else? It'll be lovely. All right. So that's my free chart for the week. Let's talk about some haul again. So this is haul from I can't even tell you when. It's part of the pile that has yet to be shown on my channel. But it's Halloween related, so I felt that this was a good week to show things. You know, so I buy the things, and as I said with Catherine Agnes, it takes me forever to stitch the things. Catherine Agnes, I looked at that chart for years and years and years before anything happened with it. But, so this is a hands-on design chart called Ghosties and Gourds, which surprisingly, I know, for all of my dislike for yellows and oranges and browns and all these things, I actually like this, which is a little bit weird. So that's the pattern. Now, this chart calls for color and cotton threads. So neither of my LNSs carry color and cotton at this point in time. So, and I've been hearing about color and cotton and color and cotton and color and cotton and color and cotton and color and cotton. Color and Cotton also does fabrics, they do threads, and you know, I was feeling deprived that I didn't know what they were. So I did order the thread pack. So this is the thread pack for that chart with the called for color and cotton threads. Now, this isn't going to go too far because it's going to come out again. Now, I am pretty confident, although I did not look at the chart on this. Generally, she's Kathy Haberman is really great about providing DMC equivalents, which she does do in this chart. So, if you can't get the color and cottons, you can always do DMC. I haven't done the comparison to see how close they are. I just I ordered it because I wanted to see what the color and cotton thing was all about. And on the site where I got this, and again, because I don't want to go too far, is they also had a piece of green color and cotton fabric. Now, it was a linen, and you know me, and I don't love linen. I prefer an even weave, but I will always end up choosing a linen if it's the right color. Now, they had this green fabric, and I like to subscribe to the no item travels alone. It used to be no chart travels alone, and then it was no fabric travels alone, and now, like, I think we're just at no item should ever travel alone. It should have a friend. And clearly the threads were one item. They were purchased as one item, so they couldn't travel alone, so they needed to have a friend. And so I bought this green fabric in a linen. Now it's I'm okay with it. I haven't decided what I'm going to use it for. I thought there was a possibility that I was going to use it for the ghosties and gourds, but I have decided that that's not correct. So this is Color and Cotton 28 count cashel linen in Poison Apple. Bold. I'm okay with this. I haven't decided what's going on it yet, but it's not yellow. It's not a yellow-based green, so that's great. Love that. What I'm going to do with this exactly is anybody's guess. I don't have that answer at this point in time. So, you know, again, I purchased this just because I wanted to see. Everybody's been talking about color cotton, and I was feeling very deprived, so I bought some. I need to go onto the, I think you can get it in Lugan in an even weave, but I would need to go and do some more research into that. And, you know, it's not like I have nothing to do. It's not like I have no stash. I have a lot of stash. I really shouldn't anyway. I don't need to anyway. But I wanted to see what everybody was talking about. So, Poison Apple 28 count cashel linen from Color and Cotton is going into my stash. And now I have to find something to put on it, because that's how this works. Now, again, as I said, I also decided that this is not the correct green for the ghosties and gourds, because of course when you do a floss toss, it's not that it's horrible, it's not bad, but it's not quite what I was looking for. Now, the called for fabric for ghosties and gourds is I'm pretty sure it's Picture This Plus. Yes, Picture This Plus Kermit. Now, I have seen Kermit in real life, and Kermit is well, you can see it here. It's a pretty yellow-based green. Not that I'm opposed to it, but anyway. But what I have, because when in doubt, go back to things that you know that you like. So I have a piece of lime 32 count Zweigart Lugana, because you know I prefer an even weave. And so here's my lime fabric, and again it's probably more of a yellow green than I would normally stitch on, but for this particular chart I think it works. Now see, even there, and I will say the difference tonally between what you see in the chart picture and what I'm holding is probably close to being true. Now, this is looking more mint than it, well, okay, this is more mint. This is giving you, it's not really mint, it's truly lime-ish, but not as yellow as the Kermit. So I like that. And so then, of course, you take that and you take your Color and Cotton threads and you put them on here and you go, oh yeah, that's my palette. Isn't it going to be lovely? I think it will be lovely. But I'm not allowed to work on it this year. Why? Because I have to finish Marbeck. Personal choice, I get that. You know, I've got a carryover start that I could do, so I technically could start it, but I'm not starting it because I'm behind on my Marbeck. And if I just start something else, I'll probably really want to work on this, and I need to finish Marbeck. I need to finish Marbeck for everybody's sanity, including myself. Marbeck finished in 2020. It'll be a good goal, and we're gonna get it accomplished, right? Say right with me, don't laugh. Anyway. So that's the haul for that I'm going to show this week. There's more haul out there. I've been trying to be better behaved. So again, I fell off the wagon a little while ago, and I have a stash waiting to show. But if I dole it out slowly over the videos, then I feel like I didn't fall off the wagon quite so badly. And I get to say, but I bought this a while ago, right? So it hardly counts. Yeah, I'm capable of justifying just about anything. All right, so we've talked about my stitching. We've talked about the Blooming Bouquet Sal very briefly. We've talked about our free chart. I've shown my haul. That leads into, let's talk about our topic, counting over 2. And again, I think it's hilarious that I'm talking about counting over 2 this week when I struggled so much with doing my back stitching on a 36 count linen. So let's start off. I've been stitching for a really long time, and even I screw up the counting. It happens. It happens. It happens to the best of us. It can happen at any point in time. I will also warn you that my diagram is not the best this week, so sorry about that, Scott, but I will walk you through the concepts of how I do the counting. So it's a much smaller board this week. Okay, so here's my board, and as usual, there's my gross reflection. I have to perch forward to get this accomplished. Okay, so clearly the big blocks, this is supposed to be when you're stitching on like Aida, and all this fine weird little grid that you can barely see is when you're working on linen. And so when you're stitching on Aida, and so I'm also going to do the diagrams of how I stitch an X, and people stitch it in different ways. So if I say I'm starting in the bottom left and you start in the top right or any of the other 3 corners, just adjust what I'm saying to what you're doing. It'll all be fine. So normally when I'm stitching, I start in the bottom left and I stitch up, and then I bring my needle back up here. So this is up through the fabric, down through the fabric, up through the fabric, down through the fabric. That's how I make my X on Aida. And I think Aida is a really great fabric for everybody to start on because it lets you start to see, you know, where your X's are going. It's the holes are big, blah 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 blah. I think it's a great fabric for everybody to start on. I prefer stitching on an even weave because I like the finer look of an even weave to Aida. If you love stitching on Aida, go for it. Fantastic. It doesn't mean you're any less of a stitcher than anybody else. If you're stitching and it makes you happy, that is awesome. Let's be very clear about that. Those crazy people who stitch on like 53, 46 count linen doesn't mean they're better stitchers than you. I think it just means they're a little bit crazier than the rest of us. And apparently their eyesight is much better. Anyway, never mind that. Anyway, la 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 la. Stitch on the fabric that makes you happy. It's very simple. If 46 makes you happy, stitch on that and good luck to you and God bless you. I'm not doing that. Anyway, okay, so let's go to the hard part. Here comes the crazy grid on the over 2. So on over 2, so same thing. I come up in a corner and I go down over 2 threads. I know this is really hard. I told you that you know, I just need to make it bigger. Screw this, let's just draw it again. Let's just make this big. This is not going to be pretty. Okay, let's try this again. In big. So if I'm stitching over 2, I'm coming up in a corner and I'm going down. There's my first leg, coming up and going down. If I'm doing one at a time, and so tying into last week's, we're variegated, this is what I would do. This is 1, 2, and then I would do this again to make my next stitch. Now, Scott's issue is when you're counting over. So you've finished an X and you now need to count over to the next time you need to use that color somewhere. So a couple of things about that. How far you carry your thread, again, is an individual choice. particularly when you're getting into linens, depending on the color of the thread, I would also look how far you're going over to see if you can see it through the fabric. If you're carrying it over 5 stitches, but you're going to end up covering, like there's 5 other colors that are going in there that are going to cover it up, fine, go ahead and do it. If you're carrying it over where there's not stitches covering it, you'll need to really check and see whether you can see it through your linen. So again, once you get past Aida, check to see what you're doing. And so when I liken this to when you're doing your counting, I also play the piano, and so I think of it in terms of taking how you count music into how you count stitches. So if you don't know anything about music, this may not make sense to you at all. But in music, if you've got a 4-beat bar, you'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're playing it in, that's if you're playing in quarter notes. If you're playing in 1/8 notes, then it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and that's the same bar, right? And so that's generally in my musical training, and the people I know, that's generally how people are taught how they're counting their way through a bar as they're going through quarter notes and 1/8 notes. When you're talking about stitching, I reverse that counting method. So if I am starting here and I need to count over 3 stitches, let me use my blue pen. So I finished a stitch. So I finished, this is the end of a stitch. Actually, let's do that. So this was the end of a stitch. Now I need to count over 3. Let's do 4 because it'll take me way to the far end. So if I'm counting over 4 stitches from where I've ended this, I'm using the point of my needle, my tapestry needle, and I would literally, just so you can see just the top of your needle, I would come over and I'd go and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and I would bring my needle up. I would stitch my first leg. I would bring my needle up in the other corner, and now my needle's back up on top. And you know what I would do then? I would go from there, and I would count back, and I would go and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and make sure it came out to the same number. So here's a 4 and there's a 4. It counted out the same both ways. I'm probably in the right spot. And then, and only then, would I do my other leg. So that's how I would count over. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And so I would, again, because I'm a bottom left, I would start at the bottom and I just count over to where I'm coming up. If you're, honestly, if you're coming from a spot where you're trying to count over and up and you're having difficulties, do it slowly. Count over and up. Don't try to be efficient just yet and try to count on the diagonals. You know, you could count diagonally over 2. Technically it would work, and 1 and 2, but if you're struggling with getting it into the right spot, I would probably go over and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. Do your bottom leg, come up in the 3rd corner, stop and recount. I was talking to a friend of mine who I was explaining to them what the topic for today was, and her comment was, and make sure you've got multiple points of reference. And so the points of reference being that if you're counting off into the distance where there's nothing, it's risky. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't do it. I've done it before. Just make sure you count back really carefully. Now, again, as someone who stitched a bunch of backstitching this week over 36 count linen and had to, you know, rip it out, and the back stitching was Krynic, so it was really unpleasant. This is, you know, it happens to everybody. And, you know, that's just a fact of stitching. Sometimes you do your counting and you get there and you're like, whoa, that is not right. And sometimes you can fudge it and sometimes you can't. So again, when I looked at mine, I'm like going, whoa, I am so far off. Yeah, no, nothing. No, I can't get the rest of it in and have it look right. So I ripped it out. Now, it's your choice. There are lots of people where you get there and you can go, you can fudge it. And I've got pieces where, trust me, I've fudged stuff. And the only, well, okay, other than, remember I told you that bird story a while ago. Other people in my family know that story. But you know, decide for yourself. But again, one of my big tricks is get there, do the bottom leg, come up on the top, and then recount back. Now, the other thing about the difference between linen and even weave is, of course, that on even weave, all of your fibers are exactly the same size. So it makes the counting a little bit easier. Linen is harder because sometimes the threads that are next to each other are similar in width, but sometimes they're very different. Sometimes you have a really skinny one, and then you have a really thick one. And so the harder part in linen is that you know, it doesn't necessarily end up being as nicely square. Like on an Aida, you end up with a square. On an even weave, you end up with a square that essentially your stitches are fitting into. In a linen, they may not necessarily be square. They may look oblongish because that's what happens on linen. And I like my geometrics and I like symmetry, which is why I like even weave better. But that's a personal choice, right? There are lots of people out there who go, they just love stitching on linen. And I think that's great. I choose even weave because, again, this is our hobby. Do what works for you. I don't necessarily love, I can do it. I can get it accomplished. And my overarching thing is color. If the color is the perfect color, I will stitch on linen because I want to achieve a look. And that's more important. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to love it as much as if, you know, I wish everybody made all the colors that I want in the even weaves that I want, but that's not how the world works. It's just life. Anyway, so Scott, I don't know if this is helpful or not. Sorry that, as I warned you, the diagrams are not fantastic. If it's not helpful, come back and ask me another question and I'll see if I can't do better. But yeah, count slowly, count twice, count 3 times, sometimes count 4. And sometimes, you know, I've done ones and I've come back and looked at a stitch and going like, okay, well, that's off. And it turns out I actually stitched it over 3 and it's 1 only in, anyway, whatever. It happens to everybody. So that's my suggestions for counting when you're stitching over 2. Now, really, is it expert advice? No, I would not say that I'm an expert. This is how I count. Will it work for you? Hopefully. If it doesn't work for you, just keep doing things until it actually works for you. Some people, they say they can just look at the linen and they can see all that stuff. That's great. I still count because I don't love working on linen. So I still count. And this is my method. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Woo! Bring the needle up, do the bottom leg, bring it up in the 3rd corner, and count again. And then, particularly if you came back and you counted 3, count again. And if you get 4, count again. Hopefully you get 4. And even me, I would probably still count again until I got 3 4s in a row, because once I had gotten a number that was not 4, it would throw me off and I'd go, oh my goodness, I think I'm in the wrong spot. And I would count again. I think I would count until I got like the same number 3 times in a row, and then I would feel confident, and then I would keep stitching. Now, sometimes, and in one of my previous videos when I was working on Marbeck, I explained to you, even though I'm a color completer, there was something that I was working on, and I, you know, in my color completing way was like, ooh, I really want to use, you know, one of the colors from over here was used over here, and I just went, I can't count that far. I can't count that far accurately. and that's just tough luck. And stop. I want it to be more accurate than just color completed. So, you know, there are times where you go like, yeah, I'm just never going to be able to count that accurately, and oh well. Finish your thread off and do something else and do another color till you're closer there and then do it again. But and that happens where you just sort of go, you know, I have a friend, she knows she has a very limited counting distance that she can do with any accuracy, and that's okay. She knows that she's not good about doing that, so don't count that far. Count only as far as you're comfortable counting, and sometimes you just look at it and go, and no. And that's okay. And with that, that's the end of this episode. So as I said before, I hope everybody is having a great weekend. If you're Canadian and you're celebrating Thanksgiving, happy Canadian Thanksgiving. If you're a Canadian in the US, my brother and his wife used to live in the US, and so I know even when they were living in the US, they still celebrated Canadian Thanksgiving. They always had a couple of Canadian friends, and so they would always get together on the Canadian Thanksgiving in the US and celebrate Canadian Thanksgiving. Either way, every day is a good day to find something to be thankful and grateful for. And with that, I hope everybody's had a good week. I hope you're going to have a good week. I hope you get some stitching in and that you find some relaxation in your stitching, and that it brings you joy. Have a good week, guys.